residential technology, lighting specialist to residential technology.
All right, we are back on the Residential Tech Talks podcast and diving into it. Out in Jackson, Wyoming, is that where you are, Ann Johnson?
I do go to Jackson.
You go to Jackson,
I am sitting on the 38th floor in Chicago, and for those Chicagoans, I'm 2 tree blocks north of the Drive.
All right. Is that Michigan Avenue? Is that the Drive, or is that something completely different?
It's Lakeshore Drive.
Okay, Lakeshore. Yeah. All right. I've been to Chicago a couple of times, so I know Michigan. I know the Loop. I know there's some good things going on. I know there's Lincoln Park as well.
Yes.
So there's some good stuff. Not too bad, right?
You got it.
I know Wrigley's there somewhere. The Phillies were just, I'm based out of Philadelphia, so I know the Phillies were just there this weekend.
I love Philadelphia. Shout out to my friends in Philadelphia.
Awesome. Well, Ann Johnson, principal and owner at Premiere Systems and Premiere SAV, and appreciate you taking the time and jumping on the podcast and chatting with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Rob. It's nice to have this kind of venue to do these kind of things. I've been enjoying residential tech, and your addition has been great.
Thank you. I appreciate that for sure. And we just had the chance to connect out in Chandler, Arizona, specifically, I think was the town. I flew into Phoenix. I don't know where you flew into, but out in Chandler there for the HTSA conference. And I look forward to talking shop, but I want to give you the chance first to tell us about yourself, your background, and your path to being an owner and principal there at Premiere.
Yeah, I started in the industry. We think it's 18 years ago because I don't do math when the numbers are odd. Haha. As an accountant, that's kind of ironic. But I started by trying to implement a piece of software that would help us track projects. Okay. And we got to a certain place with that. And then it turned out I was needed in the accounting department. And then over time, as it is, you work your way through a number of things. And I've been really fortunate to have such an amazing team and to not just be married to one of the owners, but to work alongside the founding owner and then have worked along some other owners that have been added in. And I feel like we're just a great team. And one of the things we work on very hard is bringing up the next generation.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really fun project, because I'm in HR and these things to watch people develop. It's one of my passions.
No, that's awesome. Well, now the AV side of that, is this a space or area you ever saw yourself being involved with?
I had to, because the man I married was obsessed with high-end audio. So talking about late 80s handmade French turntables is something I actually can do. And I have also had fun doing a little learning of my own. I have program control for systems. I have terminated cables for an office. I have worked with a team in Guatemala to install a security system. And that's a little more challenging than it sounds, folks.
And it sounds challenging, I'll be honest.
Wi-Fi down there is a whole different ball of wax. So
wow, that's crazy. So, well, more power to you. I mean, some wives would just be like, "Oh, that's your hobby, go do it." You were like, "I want to really get involved," and took to it.
I really did, and I really like processes. I like knowing how things work, and so that little bit of curiosity and push really drove it. And then I have this other weird thing that I have a master's in theology. So I not only like to know how things work, I like to know why and why they work and what's really going on here and, bigger picture stuff.
Do you guys, this is more of a work-life balance type question, but being married to and co-owners and things like that, do you ever get the chance to shut it off, or does it feel like it's business 24/7?
We've gotten pretty good about shutting it off. It first helped to physically not be in the same space in the office.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I think, part of it is being disciplined, right? To know that you have to build a personal life and you have to build a professional life. And then, having different, I think it would be harder if I was in doing sales also.
Sure.
So trying to set good boundaries about what we're responsible for. is really key. And I know a lot of women are helping their husbands, and they are tackling big things. I know a lot of women who are taking on the AI thing. I have a lot more conversations with women in the industry who are driving the AI for their admin team and for other teams. And so, we're
Well, that's something too, right? You're mentioning the women in the space. Like, how did that ever, like, the thought of you being a woman in the space ever, like, cross your mind as a potential challenge, or what has it been like growing in this industry from that perspective?
Yes, I know that for years I would avoid certain women's gatherings because the topic was about work-life balance. And I was like, well, you know, maybe I'm doing okay in that. But what I missed was sort of hearing where challenges were. And so
Right.
now that I have, in the last few years, started to make more connections with women in the workplace, I realize that um, it it can be intimidating because there's this belief that you had to come in with a highly technical thing. And I think that can still be a sort of a barrier for entry because there are people in our industry who believe that if you don't have the technical chops, you can then go do something else, and we'll let you participate in the technical side occasionally. So when I started hearing more of that, I was like, gosh, I really have a responsibility in the role I'm playing and the size of company I am and the groups I'm in to make sure that I'm seeing women, they're seeing me, and that you can be technical.
Yeah.
Our just, history, everyone, the first computer programmers were all women, you know, and I think it was Commodore 64 that started selling only to young boys, that started like tipping the scales the other way. So we've been here.
Yeah.
Challenges are, I think, um, to open people's minds that, there are technical women, there are back office women, there are women owners, and and we're not scary, hopefully.
No, I don't think you are for what it's worth. Right? No, that's incredible. Well, I appreciate that perspective. Not something to my mind, I didn't even think to talk about that just in our conversations. They've been awesome to have. So I appreciate you providing that perspective. Something I do want to ask, doing a little math in my head, you said 18 years. So we're in 2015. If I go back 18 years, that's about 2007, 6,
Yeah,
7,
that
in
was
that
the
range,
number. Yes,
right?
that was the year. Yes.
That's an interesting time to start a business
Oh my
in this
gosh.
space. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so our company was started 30 years ago in 95. And of course, I was, always in the background, but had my own career going. And when some changes happened at the career I was at, I was looking to, find a new position. And I was asked to kind of, during that hunt, to develop some software. And I've been fortunate enough to implement 3 big pieces of software in that time. The last one was taking a complete, ERP system and being the project manager for implementing it into our thing in 2017. Fall 2017, we went live with our current ERP. And I just am kind of the person, I think you'll hear this in a lot of us. It's like, if you see something that needs doing and somebody's willing to let you do it, you just do it. And so I happen to have some accounting background. I understood how the accounts work. We sadly had someone stealing from us, and I had to rebuild 2 or 3 years of accounting. So word to the wise, a little bit of accounting knowledge will take you very far. You can start seeing what might be wrong. You don't want anyone stealing from you.
Right. No. And then also just the economic period too. Like it was a crazy time. Not that I want to have you relive those memories, but I mean, right? Lots of, and then we have those waves, right? So, learnings from trying to start a business during what was going on from that perspective as well?
Yeah, it was very fascinating. Anyone who's lived through the Great Recession and what hit for high end late 2009, like
Right.
it was a wave.
Hmm.
And so there were definitely integrators feeling the crunch very early in 2008. We happen to work in the ultra elite spectrum of the AV industry, the CI space. And so it was very strange to hear conflicting messages from our millionaire billionaire clients, like, oh, we're still doing this. So there was this weird piece that we had to keep growing inside the contraction
Right.
of the space to be able to meet the demand until even that sector
Yeah.
decided to pull back. They were making good money because they have good people helping them ride every wave, but it was beginning to be difficult to get other people to invest in what they were doing. So while they might have been protected, their projects of building multi-dwelling units or massive commercial spaces was being put on hold. So it was very challenging to grow and then contract. And I think anyone who has had their business since 2007 is going to shudder every
Hmm.
time that comes up, like,
Yeah,
oh.
I was gonna say, because the terms you're hearing about growing and contracting, like still experiencing growth at a time where it seems like everything's contract. I feel like we've been hearing a lot of that currently. Not to say it's foreshadowing for what might happen, but you hope not. But I mean, I'm sure that gave you plenty of learnings from that you could pull on today from what you did or how you managed, to get through a period like that back then.
And we're so lucky to have so many team members, employees from that time period, so that we do look for certain things and certain indicators and, have try to keep our finger on the pulse. We were just going through an exercise of like looking at what are our wells of revenue? Like, how are we doing with our past clients? Do they need upgrades? How are our service team? How are they doing in reach outs? Are there referrals from trade partners? Just like making sure every well is kind of clean and clear
Hmm.
as much as you possibly can. It's very easy when things are going well to all of a sudden get slammed with one type of work and to forget that you have these other wells that you have to keep
Right.
ready to draw water from.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like that message, and it may have been presented. I'm pretty sure it was by Mr. Robinson team out there about just maintaining the basics and still being out in the market and doing marketing, right? Just from a basic level to make sure you're out there in front of your clients, because at a time when it's tough, that's like the last time you want to really be pulling back on marketing, right, and be forgotten about or passed
Yes.
over by others, right? So just one of those types of messages that comes to mind out of operating through a period like this, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think we're so lucky to have different marketing avenues than we did back
Yeah,
then.
absolutely. Yeah,
Uh,
social
you
media
know,
wasn't a thing during that. I mean,
it wasn't at
Facebook
all.
launched what, 04, 03? So like it was if you had a college email, I think you could
Right?
log in, but there was no
Yes.
advertising. So,
Exactly.
that's
And it
crazy.
was, let me tell you, I did have a college login and,
Yeah.
I was taking classes and there was nothing to be said on there. It
No.
was hilarious. But yeah, you mentioned HTSA and John
Yep.
Robbins and that whole team. They bring a lot of help to the table. Our vendor partners, they help a lot more in marketing than they could in the past. And I think we've all gotten a lot more savvy about it, which we're pretty fortunate to be in this
For sure.
time in this place doing this work, right?
No, that's all. So, what is working today from a business perspective? What are the areas you're seeing, growth in, or success, or interest from clients that you're really able to tap into or lean into?
Yeah. Ooh, so many good things there. One of the things that I really like, and I've had discussions recently about, is when you're dealing with the high-end elite, you get this little window of into what's next. So solving problems and being able to comment of like, hey, this is what is being asked for, this is what they're
Mhm.
wanting, and things like that. So we've talked about that on sort of, what kind of TVs, people are looking for, and what should the TV do, and what should that space do, and just the fact that we're doing these kind of meetings. How do you set up like a viewing space that really
Yeah.
operates almost like a production space, right? There's some cool stuff out there that in that world of that crosses both commercial and residential, of how do you serve a high-end client that has to have meetings from his home office in a way that really represents him well, or her.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And and what are the needs of the family, what for the home, what are the needs of the crossover space between guests, what does a guest need, what does the guest home need? And so that's been really fun to like understand how people are using their space and pushing the boundaries. And we've created some interesting spaces. We brought up Jackson, and
Mhm.
everyone asks me when they're looking at a blueprint of Jackson what an oxygen room is.
Hmm.
But they are rooms that oxygen is pumped into to help people not deal with altitude sickness. So there's all these
Okay.
clever things that,
Interesting.
are out there. There's other specialized rooms for fun and games, but we've
Sure.
had fun doing everything from a disco room to, helping a family who's bringing in an ailing member to live with
Yeah.
them. So it's kind
Oh,
of an
it's
honor to be brought into people's homes
yeah, for
and learn
sure.
what's going on.
Something that's a point you can never overlook as a business. Just the opportunity and the kind of the level of intimacy almost that when you're working with a client that you can have access to and not want to take for granted for sure.
And then I think there's a
Yeah.
lot being done. You see it with the lighting fixtures
Mhm.
and the shade. So, just this emphasis on how do spaces actually feel with lighting, sound, and doing it in sort of like an aesthetic textural way,
Yeah.
rather than I'm going to go listen to this specific artist on my system. It's more like, well, what is the general sound in the background, and how does that light look, and what do I need to be able to enjoy and relax in my own space more.
Now, those things you're talking about, obviously, you think back to 2007 lighting and shading and this and like areas you probably weren't concerned with, I imagine, at that time. So, talk about the ways in which you evolve as a business, but also evolve your way of thinking about these projects and the offerings that you have that you're able to bring to a client or, in working with other partners. Like, how do you approach that? Enabling yourself to evolve as a business, but also, you personally.
Yeah, the real point that I feel like we try to develop is our aesthetic. So it's kind of a hard thing to say, but you think about the old days of like, we just got to hang a TV.
Right.
That develops into, well, we've got to hang it in a certain way so it's comfortable. And then we've got to hang it so it's big enough, and the all the distances and the measurements. And now we have to make it disappear. Like nobody wants to see the TV. So now we pop it
Yeah.
up, we pop it down, we blend it in. And so it's, rather than focusing on the technology, it's getting your mind around what's the aesthetic of your client. You know, do they like big and flashy? We gotcha.
Yeah.
do they want something else, and do they want an elevated space? So it's a lot of times training our team to be listening for what do they love, what are their interests. And so you might find some clients are very interested in their artwork. So you better pay attention to their lighting and start learning about the systems that can enhance the way their artwork looks. I need a little lesson here. This one isn't popping, today, but it's that kind of thing. These colors could be popping if I had installed a whole, tonal light system. I think solving problems, so not only aesthetics, but then what problems are they having? Are they having trouble with access and learning that? Not being afraid to learn something and partner with people. So I think one of the things our team has learned after having consultants and people like that help us, shout out to EOS, is to be challenging ourselves, to not be afraid to take something new on, right?
I think that kind of goes to what you were saying earlier about talent, the next generation and talent development too, right? Because there's the old saying of hard to train or teach an old dog new tricks. I imagine there's plenty of that happening in this space because you have installers and technicians who are having to kind of retrain themselves in how they talk to a client, but it also gives you the opportunity with that next generation to start out right and have them be trained in a way that they're in essence more successful when they talk to a client because they've got that skill set of focusing less on the technology as they're coming in. Yes, they know what they're doing, but at the same time they know how to have the conversation so that they're hitting the right points in that conversation throughout with the client about what they want and the problems they can solve and everything that you're talking about.
Yeah, I know that our industry has like this depth of knowledge of how it exactly works, right? And some of our clients genuinely do get interested in that. But there's this real gift to be able to translate. I'm very passionate about cultures communicating, and it's like, how can our tech lives and what we love, like, oh, they just updated this or that amp and it now does this or that thing, and we love that, but how do we communicate that to a client so that they also will love it, right? And it's really like translating languages.
I think too, even beyond just the client, like when you talk to the professionals in those other spaces, right? When you talk to architects and you're able to speak their language, or you talk to an interior designer, a lighting designer, and you're able to speak their languages, that has to, benefit you as a business and everyone involved in kind of what you're doing.
It really does. You're entering the realm of like finishes and materials that are used for every surface, and having to know how that how you might impact positively or negatively.
Yeah.
That you want to know that a surface is like, that's $100,000 floor. You want to know that going in, and
Right.
because you don't then want to do something that's going to distract from what is the client's passion. And so, yeah, learning all the different types of colors, of shades, and the fabrics has been a real learn and grow moment for our team. The style of drapes. I really was blown away when I realized that techs doing louvered shades on multiple windows have to program it so they all stop the same, that all the little
The little slats.
Venetians turn the same. I was like,
whew.
It's
It's crazy. Well, to the point,
easy.
even like the technology side of it, obviously we're always learning and evolving, and there's ways and avenues, whether it's through manufacturers, to get that education. When you're talking about learning that new language and the colors and the fabrics and things like that, where are you going to do that, and what's it been like from a from a rest of your team perspective, like a willingness, and do you find it at times to be a struggle to get them to get on board with what you're trying to do?
Yeah. So I think what's really fun about having some, time in HR is that some of it's like a personality type, right? It's like perfectionist welcome, please come our way. But it's also, there are people, yeah, they care if like a little switch on the wall is just askew, it's hard to kind of, you don't want to put them through a whole test of that, but you want to talk about those things. And then it's recognizing that there might be somebody who's really good for your business in that trade space, right? You may think, oh, I really need a shades expert, or I really need a lighting designer. But if somebody is like adjacent in a interior designer position or wanting one, they might be good because they're going to be able to bring some of the language of that trade, and you can teach them what they need to know to either sell or design or whatever it is. So it's a little bit of like collaboration with these trade partners. It's a little bit of like hiring with a broader mindset of like, where are we drawing from? And then it's, trying to attend and tap into like the other trade partners resources. Like there's a seminar on fabrics, go to it, or something like that, if you are the person that's going to be speccing some of these shades, right?
Well, that's an important part too, because I think knowing the space, and you talk about perfectionists, sometimes being that perfectionist, the owner of a small integration firm, you want to be perfect at everything and know everything, but at the same time, you can only wear so many hats. So that idea of having someone that can help you, or that is the interior design person, or just that, that outside expertise that you can bring in, I think is an important thing to recognize as well, so that you don't have to be the one that knows it all about everything.
Right. I'm sure you experienced it in your industry too. Like here you're doing podcasts. Did you know anything a few years ago? No, right?
No comment. Absolutely. 100%. No, it's so true. It is very true. So, no, that's awesome. Well, you talk about the groups and areas you can go to. One thing I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, we talked about HTSA. I learned recently while we were there together, you're on the board at HTSA. Fairly, I know, right? So a new appointee to the board, is that right?
Yes. Yes, I was voted in October and then installed in January. And it's
awesome.
A team of, I'm going to get the count wrong. I think there's 10 of us. Sorry, guys. But we are asked to kind of listen in and hear what is going on in HTSA, help guide some of the decisions, like, do we go this way or this way, and help understand what some of the complexities are in being a buying group.
Yeah. Yeah. So that experience, talk about, the importance of it, for you to be involved, and for you personally, also the business, but then also just the overall group experience too. We'll kind of dive into that as well.
Yeah. And so for those people who don't know, HTSA is a buying group that does limit its membership, and it has an application process, and the members of that do vote people in. And we have been very fortunate to be members for a few years now and have a lot of friends in that buying group. And the buying group is trying to align what its members are buying with some key vendors to take advantage of economies of scale. Like, hey, let's all point to this one vendor and get them and have them be our source. And in that, though, HTSA is more, it's trying to help people like get through tariffs and all that. We had a hour-long discussion on tariffs where, yes, as we knew at that point, there wasn't a lot to say. They were on again, they were off again.
Pretty sure one of those meetings happened on Liberation Day, if I recall.
Yes.
So the timing couldn't have been better. So.
Couldn't have been better. And it was actually, it actually sounded like it was going to be perfect timing until it wasn't. So, but it was fascinating. It gives you, being in a part of a buying group, for anyone who's considering it, gives you this ability to understand what might be going on better, that a vendor can't take necessarily all the time to tell you, but by being in a buying group, you can hear like why a vendor cannot sell you something that they've had on the shelf for a couple months pre-tariff without now charging a tariff. It's like, that's just too difficult to track and deal. And So a lot of vendors were kind, and they're like, for the next 30 days, we won't have tariffs or something like that, where they give you this window to still purchase, but then they have to put blanket
Yep.
amounts on those products that are affected. So it gets you that little more sympathy,
Sure.
and understanding of what the bigger picture is. And I really appreciate that about what my time in both attending HTSA for the few years and now the short time being on the board.
Yeah. What's kind of the you talked about the role and what you guys get to do as part of the board, but as you get further into it, I know you mentioned obviously just a few weeks, couple months at this point on it. What are you looking forward to about that experience of being able to influence some of the direction and things like that as far as the group's concerned?
Yeah, they really have spent time like investing in AI and things like that. And I'm in a group that's trying to find ways to expand AI, for example. I I think for me, what I feel like one of my most important roles on that board will be is to say, what is HTSA? What are the core values? And whatever it is we're doing, do they fit our core values? Are they serving our audience, our members, and our vendors, and anyone else that is associated? And are we bringing what they actually really need? And I think that is what I've heard from every board member is a um, very concerned of like, are we doing the right thing for our members? And that's what you would want from any buying group. It's like,
Yeah.
are they really taking your best interest in heart? Are they asking questions? Are they wanting to know more about what your challenges are? And what I think is cool is on something like just using AI as an example, it's providing resources. So it's, do we have a good resource? And then, how can we encourage other people? How can we let them dip their foot in the pool? How can we go further? And so what you find is that when you are in a group that's like minded, that's trying to better everyone in the group, that's trying to provide resources to every group, then you actually carve out space in your own company to tackle it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, like, yeah, AI is kind of floating around, but now that we have a few more tools at hand, we're taking a look, and I see it, in all of these things. It's challenging, but that's an opportunity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a whole topic I feel like we could spend another episode on in AI. But there's
Yeah.
another topic that I want to bring up that you mentioned previously, and that is tariffs that we could also probably have an entire episode on.
Yeah.
But they're happening. I know as we sit here today and talk about what you're doing and planning for. By the time we publish, even if it is a few days or weeks, it could change. So it feels like a fool's errand to try to discuss them in the form of a podcast. But at least from a preparatory standpoint, is there anything you're doing or potential impacts, conversations you're having, that you could talk to for, other integrators that are listening as far as, what they could be doing to prepare or get themselves ready for potential impacts?
Yes. And I will say what's kind of nice is to sound crazy, but yet, like, we've been through this once,
Yep.
fortunately. And so, like, it wasn't as scary this time. And the real difference I'm noticing is that clients are much more aware this time around. So everyone's reporting the conversation sounds very easy. I'm also, our company is a member of the Guild, which is
Mm-hmm.
a smaller group of high-end integrators. And we're very much into exchanging like, here, what language are you giving to your
Yeah.
clients? And how are you talking about it? And um, everyone's reporting that, yeah, you put it in your contracts, you put it in your language, you describe how you're going to handle it the best the best you can, because with a lot of projects in the CI world, you're selling them and they won't execute for another year and a half.
Right.
And so you have to kind of buffer if if some very, very high tariff goes on. Can't imagine that happening. How do
Like
you deal with it?
147% or
I
something like
don't
that? I
know,
don't know.
right?
You know? Oh.
And so you hear, our vendors are trying to communicate a lot about where they're getting their sources, what products will be affected. And fortunately, they've been through a little of this too. And it's starting to, I know there's a lot of people that are just really like, this is terrible. But I will tell you, keep on it, press into it. Your clients are a little more aware. Nobody's going to be shocked or surprised. It is challenging to talk about does anyone decide to make a purchase now, not having real
Yeah.
assurance of the price at the end.
Right.
And that is, I think, the really big challenge we're all facing with tariffs is like, we can tell you this is how we're going to deal with it. Can we guarantee what that ends up being to your pocketbook? Oh, that's tougher.
Right. And there's also all those other variables too, right? From the manufacturers. It could be, one line item in a project that gets changed because the manufacturer ultimately, they may be saying now that things are going to remain the same, but much like integrators, I know they probably have their own clauses where it's like subject to change or, only guaranteed for a X amount of day period. So a project, to your point, if it's a year and a half out and things go well beyond that period, things can change. So I know it kind of draws back to the session that happened at HTSA with the couple of manufacturers that were up there. I know, it felt again like a fool's errand to do it, but at the same time, if there was anything you pulled out of that session, it's the fact that communication, right? I think that was the main theme that came out of it was just the constant communication, whether it's between the integrator and manufacturers to understand what they're doing, and then the flip side, right? The client to the integrator to make sure that it's just open lines throughout so that, to your point, everyone knows this is happening. I think there's plenty more awareness around it. So it's expected at some level, to some degree. But they just want to know, right? So as long as you're keeping them in the know and being honest and open and transparent about, what's happening or what could happen, it seems like that at least softens any potential blowback from the situation we're all facing.
Yeah. And again, not only communication, like, manufacturer, maybe sales rep,
Right.
dealer like us, it's also, the fear that people have of talking about it with their clients has to go away. And that is starting to go away. But it's when do you have the conversation? If you started with it, great. It's just you can't then wait again until the final bill. It is kind of the consistent message, right?
Yeah.
It's like, remember, here it is. And so that's the challenge, is like, we can think we communicated well,
Right.
but if we didn't keep
There's nothing wrong
massaging the
with
message all the way along, it can still surprise people.
There's nothing wrong with over communicating. If anything, from one communicator to another, the more you talk, the better it potentially is by the end of it. You can only having a teacher as a wife too. I know there's the checks for understanding, right, in classroom management style. So it's something similar to that. Just you have those constant reminders throughout that. You don't want it to be a surprise, because that's ultimately the worst possible outcome, in this type of situation.
And it has been really fun to see like a new form of communication coming out of the manufacturer, the vendor, of like, I'm sure they've gotten 1,000 calls like, why don't you just move operations, right? And then you're actually seeing communications come back of like, yes, we actually have moved and we're planning on moving, and this is what we're doing to, hedge bets, if you will.
Right.
There's some places you can't really move from very quickly and still have quality control.
Right.
But they are much more so communicating about steps they're taking to spread out the risk among different countries and what they can do in the US.
It's, we've been following it on Residential Tech Today with our own sort of updates as we get them from different manufacturers. So it's, every time we get something to add to that ongoing sort of collection, we're building like a log of all the updates from whether it's news related or manufacturer. It's just been crazy to see, but encouraging too, that so many are, whether they're putting out alerts about any potential price increases or whether they plan to eat the cost for now. The fact is they are communicating and they're doing something, or to your point, they're attempting to move again. So it's the industry's active, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's super fun to watch that happen, because again, you could read it and be like, this is too much communication and terrible. But if you really sit in it, you're watching, wow, this is a real moment in time that we'll look back and say, remember when, and we learned lessons from it. And I try and I don't always glass half full it. I can be accused of glass half empty, but it's the mindset of anything like this, a tariff or a change, it will make you stronger. Trust me. Even if it takes a couple bruises along the way, it's that kind of resiliency that does create a 30-year-old company.
No, that's awesome. And I think some cool messages and takeaways for integrators out there listening to this for sure. So, we appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation, man.
Rob, I loved it. I loved talking with you.
I know. A nice follow-up from the meeting at HTSA. And, like I said, I think before we started, but, I appreciate you, me not scaring you away from doing a podcast. So this was a lot of fun. And, one I'm sure we'll definitely have a follow-up down the road, but, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you again for having me. Good luck to you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Residential Tech Talks podcast, please subscribe to us on the platform you're listening on. Also, be sure to follow Residential Tech Today on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist to Residential Tech Talk.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.